at the beginning I kind of said that you don't need skill to solve a problem. And what I really mean is you don't need a specific skill. If you have skills of your own, you should be able to tap into those. So I kind of grew up and always loved comic books. There's a whole stack of novels back there. I always loved reading them, but I could not draw as an illustrator. I was much more an abstract. I'm a far better woodworker than an illustrator, let's say. But I wanted to do something. I had a few paintings like this. There's that one on the wall there, which is what we're really going to be talking about, and kind of how I achieved creating what I think are really nice illustrations without being very skilled in that field. So there's 6 steps that I went through, or that I've broken it down to for this process. And the first one is that kind of ideation stage. So like I said, you kind of need to, if you start with nothing, you've got to build up from nothing. So this started because I wanted a nice big painting on our wall. I didn't want to print. I love the texture and the feeling of real painting. I couldn't find or afford an original piece of art that we wanted on the walls. So despite all of my problems, I thought I'd just create one myself. I saw this panel from Batman that was created by Bruce Timm and thought it would be a good picture to work with. So the next stage is to create a plotter. So so the idea was basically that I could use my CNC machine, but really it could have been a 3D printer or a laser cutter. The only limitation would have been the size. So it's use my CNC machine to create this drawing, and what I would do is have a pen basically instead of the cutter held by the CNC, and it would just move it about where I told it to go to draw. This is called a plotter. At the time, I had no idea this was a thing. I would have just gone to the store and bought one. But because I had only done woodworking with the CNC before, I made kind of an apparatus that would hold the pen and apply proper pressure, which is really the thing. You can't just like jam a pen into a board and expect it to work properly. So I used like some rubber bands and stuff to like hold a pen down, and it would like retract kind of like a shock absorber. So once I kind of had that working, I just realized there was a video on there. Okay, cool. So once I had that working, I had to take that image and make it work so it could be processed by my CNC and my computer. So the first thing was to kind of re-lay out the scene so that it fit on the paper that I wanted. So you can see this is a much more landscape view as opposed to the original, which was taller. I had to turn this kind of low-res, ugly, well not ugly, but like blurrier photo into something that could be read by my computer, which is called a vector image. So instead of, I don't know if this is too complicated, instead of pixels, which are like colors, a vector is defined by math. So you're saying this isn't yellow, this has a value, mathematical value. And anyway, that's too detailed. But so I had to do that. And then finally, the CNC was only holding one pen at a time, so I basically just needed to find all the outlines of the image that I was painting. So the fourth step is the CAM process. So this is by far like the most annoying part of this, I would say, and kind of more difficult part. So once I had the image set up, like I said, the printer only does what you tell it to do. So I had to tell it exactly how to trace everything. Don't just like run the pen all over the place or draw a hand and then drag it to draw a face. Like you have to move it in different spots and that kind of stuff. So this is called CAM, or you would use a CAM software, which is computer-aided manufacturing. So I use something that's called Fusion 360. And so you essentially, if you have a 3D printer, you would use a slicer, which is it would take your 3D model and then separate it to all these different layers that'll print out. A lot of that is somewhat automated, where you can kind of start with the model and give it some parameters. Yeah, so that's how that works. So then finally, step 5 was the actual CNC of the painting, as you can see in the video here. So that's the CNC holding the pen and painting it, or drawing across the canvas. When I tell people that I painted that picture, or I had my CNC or a robot create that image, this is pretty much what they think of. And they're like, oh, that's so easy. You didn't do anything, you just hit a button and it printed. This was by far the easiest thing that I did in this entire project, and also the fastest. So there's just a lot that kind of goes into it beforehand, and again, when you're kind of starting with nothing, you figure it all out on your own, which is also kind of the fun part. And then finally is the actual painting, which I do love painting, I just am not good at drawing straight lines. You can kind of tell in this one, this was actually the first one that I did. And here, I'll just show you real quick up close. But you can really see the texture and everything that's in there. And that's kind of what I like about doing paint instead of, just a print, that I can actually get these textures and this contrast and gradients and stuff like that. It's a lot different than just something you could print off of a printer. But so this is what.
Did you paint? Did you manually paint the fillet?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
And use robot for the.
Yeah. So this is what came off the CNC.
Okay.
Which, looking at it now, is not impressive to some extent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it looked like this, and then basically I filled in all the black solid to start. And then kind of a base coat of all the colors that I wanted to use.
With brush?
Just by hand.
Right.
So yeah, everything at this point, from the first one, is just
Yeah.
with a brush and acrylic paint for this one.
And could you go ahead and fill the whole thing?
Yeah.
With the plotter, yeah?
I had different ideas about swapping out the pens and using different colors and stuff, but well, one, like I said, I like painting, so I wanted to do that part. And two, it infinitely got more complicated. But yeah, the thing on this one in particular, I really wanted to get the hair kind of a bit different. So you actually have to get a little bit close, but I intentionally made it pretty flat, and then the red hair has got some more depth and color to it. So this is kind of building up that. You can see in this frame, the pen, because I actually had to use a marker that had a somewhat thick tip. Her mouth looked pretty nasty, so I ended up painting that with white and then going back over it by hand. And then, well, here's the finished picture, but of course it's hanging right there as well. And so that's how I got there. And here's a bit of a side-by-side of the original. And the painting. So it was kind of my goal, not just to have a giant printer, to make something that I couldn't print at home, but to also put some kind of style to it. So you can tell that I changed the orientation so it would fit where we wanted to hang it on the wall, but it's also slightly different in that I had to crop these in different ways. Remove a lot of the background, was too detailed to hit with the marker. Obviously change the color scheme a little bit, so to kind of create my own style for that. And yeah, that's pretty much, I guess, the process. So I made these two, and I have another one at home, and that was about a year and a half ago, and then we moved to Ireland, and I haven't been able to do another one since then. But it's kind of just a fun project to figure out, again, how could I do this if I wanted to do something. So I'm just gonna take it back real quick to my Lego question. Axel, do you have a guess by any chance how many Legos, how many combinations could be made with the 6 bricks?
6.
Yeah. So if you stack these in any possible way.
There would still be 6 combinations.
Well, so I used to have some in hand, but I didn't have any today because it's a lot easier to show when you have them. So you could stack them all straight on top of each other, and that would be like one way, or you could maybe offset them where you have kind of like these two are touching those two, and then these two are touching those two, and you can kind of change the location of them, let's say.
Make them look like stairs.
Yeah. So just, anyway, I don't want to put you on the spot. Shannon, any guesses? She doesn't know the answer. I
I
promise.
don't. I'm guessing it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I would realize the actual number. I don't have those sort of math skills.
Okay.
Factorial combinations
Yeah.
in 3D, is that right?
Yeah.
6 factorial.
You could use all 6 cubes sometimes, or only 2 cubes, or cubes, rectangles.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
think about not using them at all.
Well,
Interesting.
I'll tell you the answer. This is not a rhetorical question. Well, yeah, okay, it kind of is. But so 915,104,765 combinations. So basically a billion, or very close to a billion. Which it's not a real question because it's yeah, it's like an inconceivable number almost, right? Like I can't. I guess if you went to the beach, maybe there's a billion grains of sand, but that's pretty much the closest thing I could think of. And so, like, I would ask people this when I was interviewing them, because I mean, I could care less what they said. It was more about how you thought about the problem. And I'd get a bunch of responses from people that would try and do the math, like kind of like you were thinking, like, okay, if there's 8 circles on each one, and then I multiply it by 8, and then to the 8th power or something like this, and you pretty much never get there. Like, it's not something you could do by hand, but it's at least a thought process that like people understand. Other people would say, I don't know, but like I could find out, or let me draw that if I had something. And then there was always a person that would just look at me and be like, I have no idea. Like I'm not interested, basically. And those were kind of the people that I looked out for. I mean, could be a great person, but I think it's like, one, the initiative to like at least think about it for a little bit, and 2, like, yeah, like how does your brain kind of work? It's more about that than it is about getting to the answer. Anyway, so that is my presentation on the different tools and stuff. Yeah, I hope it was interesting, or you learned something. Do you have any questions? That's okay. Yeah.
I think what's cool is that you can not only do that trace and outline with your CNC machine, but you also make that.
Oh yeah,
as
I
part of
completely
your
forgot.
process. And you're
So
really cool example.
I meant to say, yeah, I left my example. So these are 3D printed. So these are plastic. Let's see. There, either one. So those are made on this machine. This is our open sign that hangs on the door, which was laser cut. So it's not a great example because it's pretty simple, but you can see the size or
Also the
kind
bottle up there.
of.
You could pull that.
Oh yeah, this is also engraved, so it's not just cut, which I didn't really talk about. But yeah, like this bottle was engraved as well. Nice. And then as far as the CNC goes, I don't have a lot of great small examples, but I do have this skateboard that I made a couple weeks ago as a kind of another experiment to see just like if I could do something. So you could never, well, I'm not gonna say never because they're industrial laser cutters and stuff. Well, like you really wouldn't do this on you definitely wouldn't do it on a 3D printer or a laser cutter. But one, I can cut the outline of this on my CNC. The thing that's kind of more interesting is that you can't see it too well, but there's kind of little divots in there where the wheels are. And there's pockets here. It's also, actually the front tips up. If you look at the lines on the bottom, it's a different width.